The storm came out of nowhere, which was impressive, considering Jace lived in a part of Alaska that practically sold weather tantrums by the dozen. Sensors had been clear, at least until his breakfast burrito turned to lava in the microwave, and the comms panel blinked out with the petulance of a moody teenager. That's when the alarm started shrieking. Atmospheric breach, unauthorized descent, impact imminent. Jace stared at the screen, chewing. Well, that's not great, he mumbled, spraying tortilla fragments on the console. Nessa's voice crackled to life overhead, clipped and unamused. Shall I prepare the crash protocol, or are you hoping to hug the debris and absorb its secrets? I don't know, Ness. Depends. Is it on fire? I only hug flaming wrecks on weekends. He pulled on his cold gear with the reluctance of someone preparing to fight a bear, using only dry sarcasm. The outpost garage door groaned as he steered the snow rover into the icy night, headlights barely carving through the sideways sleet. GPS marked the impact site 2 clicks east, near the edge of what he generously called Lake Regret, a frozen basin that tried to kill him every third Thursday. When he reached the crater, the snow had stopped as abruptly as it had begun. Steam hissed off the wreck, a sleek obsidian pod buried halfway in ice and pine needles. The entry hatch had burst open, but no flame, no bodies, no blackened skeletons. Just quiet. Then she moved. Not a dramatic leap or groan, just a shift. A hand pressed weakly against the pod's edge, trembling, smeared with silver-green blood. Jace blinked. Then he swore. Then he swore again, in 3 different languages, 2 of which were technically extinct. She was humanoid, mostly, about 6 feet tall, lean but muscular. Her skin shimmered like quartz dust under frost, and her hair hung in tangled blue-black ropes over long, pointed ears. Her clothing looked like it had lost a bar fight with an asteroid belt. She gazed up at him with huge amber eyes that held a look he recognized immediately. Please don't shoot me. Instead, he crouched, took off his glove, and held out a protein bar. You allergic to peanuts? Her brows twitched like they were trying to remember how facial expressions worked. She opened her mouth, closed it, then finally rasped something in heavily accented standard. No. Nuts. Fall. Yeah, that's clear, Jace muttered, glancing back at her ruined pod. Nice landing. 10 out of 10 for drama, 2 out of 10 for aerodynamics. He tried to lift her, nearly dislocated his spine, and grunted. Okay, you're heavier than you look. Either that or I skipped leg day for 6 years straight. She made a noise, half gasp, half laugh, and passed out on his shoulder. By the time he got her back to the station, Nessa was having a meltdown. You brought an unknown extraterrestrial entity into our sealed environment, without quarantine, or security protocol, or she was cold, Jace snapped, kicking the door shut with his boot, and half dead. So are most of the moths you rescue from the air filters, but you don't give them a blanket and medical attention? Jace deposited her on the infirmary cot and dug through the med supplies. She's got a pulse, respiration's shaky, gonna need a system scan. Nessa huffed like a disappointed ant. At least scan yourself before she gives you alien lice. Alien lice, Jace said flatly. That's where we're starting. While Nessa grudgingly activated the station's bioscanners, Jace removed what was left of the woman's suit. The fabric resisted, like it was reluctant to let her go. Underneath, her skin was marbled with bruises and glowing veins that pulsed softly, like bioluminescent threads. The scan word. Humanoid, Nessa said reluctantly. Internal organs similar to baseline human physiology. Elevated core temperature. Neural activity is complex, higher synaptic response than your average Nobel laureate. And she has ears. Wow. Alert the media. I mean those ears. Jace, they're not for show. I'm reading electromagnetic resonance patterns. She's tuned to something. Like an antenna? Like a violin, on fire. She woke up 2 hours later, bolting upright like someone had jammed a lightning rod into her spine. Jace, who'd been dozing on a toolbox, spilled coffee into his lap. Ow! Good morning to you too. She flinched at the sound. Her eyes darted, wide and untrusting. He held up both hands. Hey, whoa, you're safe. No one's gonna hurt you, Unless you touch my coffee again. Then it's war. She blinked, confused. You help me? Technically, yes. Unofficially, no. Emotionally, I'm somewhere between terrified and mildly curious. She looked down at the blanket. Her fingers flexed on the edges. Why? Jay scratched his head. Would you believe I was bored? A pause, she whispered. I have nowhere left to go. He didn't answer right away. He just stood, walked over to the shelf, and took down a chipped ceramic mug with a cartoon walrus on it, poured her the least toxic instant tea he had, handed it to her with a shrug. Then you're already halfway home, he said. She stared at him. The silence stretched. Then so quietly he almost missed it, she said, You're strange. Jace grinned. Lady, that's the nicest thing anyone said to me in years. Her name, she told him later, was Alaris. Her ship hadn't crashed. It had been shot down. She didn't know by who. Maybe bounty hunters. Maybe worse. She didn't remember. Something in her mind was shattered, pieces flaking off like ice in sunlight. Over the next few days, she recovered slowly, eating nutrient bars with the grace of a confused deer, and insisting the microwave was a metal demon of unpredictable fury. She learned to say, what the hell, in perfect imitation of Jace's tone, which disturbed him greatly. When she asked what a binge watch was, he introduced her to Firefly. 2 episodes in, she declared, These people are very bad at stealth and fashion. You fit right in, Jace muttered. The station, always quiet, started to feel less like a prison and more like a place. There was laughter, arguments about toast settings, awkward conversations about interstellar customs involving antenna grooming. Alaris insisted on fixing the busted solar panels, even though she still winced when she moved too fast. One night, as the auroras writhed above and the generators hummed, she turned to him and asked, Why did you really save me? He shrugged, picking at a bolt with a wrench. Maybe I was waiting for something interesting to fall out of the sky. She tilted her head. And if I had been a weapon, or a spy, or a sentient fungus in disguise? He looked at her long ears, glowing veins, tired but curious face. Well, he said, then I guess this fungus makes a decent cup of tea? She laughed. It was the first time he'd heard her really laugh. And despite everything, despite the storms and the secrets, and the strange readings still coming from her scans, Jace realized something truly terrifying. He didn't want her to leave. The toaster exploded. Not dramatically, but with enough of a pop and sizzle to launch 2 slices of barely toasted bread into the air like they were making a run for it. One slice hit the ceiling and stuck. The other landed perfectly on Alaris's shoulder. She blinked at it, utterly deadpan. Is this a weapon? Jace didn't look up from the panel he was welding. That's breakfast. She plucked it off her shoulder and turned it over in her hands like it was an ancient artifact. Your culinary technology is extremely violent. Yeah, well, the toaster's been angry since I tried to rewire it to play jazz. You attempted to give your cooking device emotions? Only smooth ones. It refused Coltrane and set itself on fire. Alaris didn't respond immediately. She set the toast down like it might detonate. You are either very brave or extremely inefficient. I'm going to take that as a compliment. She hadn't tried to leave. Not once. She hadn't even asked when she could. And that wasn't the kind of silence Jace was used to. Usually, visitors to his station lasted 3 hours before requesting immediate exfil or stabbing him with a broken stylus out of sheer boredom. But she had claimed the corner of the main workspace, patched up his diagnostics array, and labeled every mislabeled wire with color-coded strips, each labeled in a mix of Virulon script and bad puns. One cable now read, "Red, but not dead." Probably, she was helping, but she still flinched when the wind howled, still checked the sky twice before stepping outside. Jace caught her one evening standing at the top of the comms tower, eyes fixed on the stars. He was halfway up the ladder, holding a coil of coaxial cable and cursing the cold when she said, "My people believed the stars were the songs of the dead." He paused. Huh. That's, poetic. We buried our honored in crystal spires and left them where no orbit would reach. Each one sings. She looked down at him. Do your dead sing? Some of my relatives at weddings. but not well. She didn't laugh, not at first, but a moment later she smiled. It was small, crooked, but real. He made a mental note, morbid jokes, mild success. She came back down without being asked, took the cable from his hands and threaded it through the rigging with more grace than someone with frost-numb fingers should have. At one point she slipped and instinctively grabbed the live relay. Jace yelped, reaching for her. Instead of being electrocuted, the panel fizzled, blinked blue, then hummed back to life at 110% output. He stared at her. "You just rebooted my system with your hand." She looked sheepish. "My neural structure harmonizes with frequency patterns. I think your relay liked my mood." "My relay likes jazz. You and it would get along." She tilted her head. "Does it also set bread on fire?" "Only on Thursdays." They fell into a rhythm. She adjusted quickly to Earth cycles, although she insisted that nighttime here felt upside down. Jace tried to explain rotational axes with an empty soda can and a flashlight. She responded by hacking into Nessa's internal scheduler and replacing every calendar entry with spiral dance hour at 3 a.m. When he asked what that meant, she just smiled and said, "You'll find out." The real surprise came when she started fixing things without being asked. The backup generator, which had never operated above 67% efficiency, suddenly purred like a contented cat. His emergency drone, something that hadn't flown since the last time he tried to strap a snowboard to it, was in the air, mapping terrain with advanced sensors that she swore she didn't steal from a warship. Jace confronted her about that while elbow deep in a hydrovalve. "I thought you didn't remember how to fix stuff." "I don't remember how to cry or how to sing," she said, testing voltages with a repurposed hairpin. "But systems make sense. They don't lie, they only break." Jace wiped his hands. "You okay with that?" She didn't answer. Later that night, Jace found her curled up on the couch under a pile of synthetic blankets, watching an ancient episode of Mythbusters with rapt fascination. She pointed at the screen. "Do humans often use explosives to solve questions?" "Only the smart ones." "Then your species is deeply chaotic. And yet we built civilization. Go figure." She was quiet for a while, then asked, "Is it always this cold here?" "Only when it's not on fire." Elleris looked around the room. "I still don't know why you let me stay." He shrugged, turning over a diagnostic screen. "You fixed my drone. That basically qualifies you for tenant status. And if I had destroyed it instead, then I'd call you a guest. And if I had killed you?" He looked up. "Then I'd say thank you for waiting until after breakfast." She laughed again, louder this time. Nessa groaned from the wall speaker. "Please stop flirting with the fugitive alien. It's making my circuits awkward." "I'm not flirting," Jace muttered. "Yes, you are," Alaris said at the exact same time. He changed the subject to thermal flux stabilizers. It didn't help. The next morning, they found an encrypted transmission beacon buried in the snow 2 miles south. The casing was Virulon, new, untouched by weather. Alaris stared at it like it might reach up and strangle her. Jace crouched beside it. "Is this yours?" She shook her head. "It's a locator, not mine." "Friend or foe?" She hesitated. "Depends who's listening." He opened the casing. The beacon was transmitting on a tightly focused frequency, encoded. Definitely not human tech. Definitely not legal either. "You think they're looking for you?" "They're always looking," she said, voice low. "Well, that's cheerful." Back at the station, he disabled the beacon, shoved it in a lead-lined box, and offered her coffee. She sniffed it suspiciously. "This smells like carbonized mud." "That's because it is. Welcome to Earth." She sipped it anyway, then made a face, then sipped again. After a long silence, she said, "I didn't expect kindness." "Most people don't," Jace said, sitting across from her. "But you're not most people. You fixed my toaster. I thought it exploded. And yet I'm still eating." She looked down at her mug, ears twitching faintly. "You should be more careful." "Yeah," he said, "but then I'd be bored." She smiled without looking up, and for the first time since she crashed into his life, Jace realized he wasn't just playing host. He was keeping her safe, whether he meant to or not. Jace was trying to recalibrate the atmospheric regulator when the station's lights blinked, flickered like they were debating a life decision, then surged back to full brightness, accompanied by a faint musical chime that absolutely should not have existed. "Did you just install a theme song in the lighting system?" he shouted toward the general vicinity of the lounge. There was a beat of silence. Then Alaris answered, much too casually, "Only when the temperature hits optimal conditions." He stood up, rubbing his eyes. "Why would that warrant a victory jingle?" "Because you said, and I quote, 'If I ever get this stupid regulator to stabilize above 70 degrees, I'll sing like a Disney princess.'" He groaned. "You remembered that?" "I did. Shall I prep the karaoke machine?" They didn't have a karaoke machine, or at least they hadn't. Judging by the way Nessa suddenly piped up with a pitch-perfect rendition of "Let It Go" in synthetic soprano, that situation had recently changed. Alaris was becoming unsettlingly good at integrating with the station. She'd figured out how to rewrite Nessa's subsystems without triggering a security lockdown, reprogrammed the food dispenser to dispense something she called proto-chow, and rigged a holographic interface for the comms panel that now responded to interpretive dance. Jace discovered this the hard way when he slipped on a power cord and accidentally activated a 5-minute loop of ancient Earth commercials featuring toothbrushes with sentient AI. She told him it was a cultural enrichment subroutine. He told her it was a hate crime. But it wasn't just jokes and misfired programming. She was searching for something. Not visibly, she didn't pace or panic, but whenever she thought he wasn't watching, her fingers would twitch in specific patterns, like she was calculating. She'd stare at the console's blank screen long after it went to sleep. Once, Jace walked in on her, scanning the electromagnetic spectrum, with her hand pressed against the glass, like she was waiting for it to speak. He tried not to ask too many questions. Tried. "What are you looking for?" "Ghosts," she said. "You mean literal ghosts or the spooky metaphor kind?" "Either would suffice." The next day, the solar array shorted out for the first time in a month. Alaris narrowed her eyes at it like it had personally insulted her ancestors. She suited up and stomped into the snow with a toolbox and a flamethrower. "That's not a tool," Jace said over the comms. "It is if you're persuasive," she replied. 15 minutes later, the array was working perfectly, and the pine tree behind it was missing most of its branches. Jace opted not to comment. They began testing the signal from the locator beacon. Alaris insisted on handling the decryption herself. "If they're tracking me, they'll recognize my code signature," she said. "But if I invert the packet resonance—" "English, please," Jace muttered, sipping from his mug. "I make it sing wrong, so they don't know it's me." "Ah, sabotage with style." "Exactly." While she worked, he tried to focus on repairing the external drone launcher. It kept misfiring in windstorms and had once ejected a probe directly into the outhouse wall. Now he had a mildly cratered lavatory and a drone with performance anxiety. "I think it's afraid of the toilet," he said while tightening a bolt. "Then you should comfort it," Alaris said, not looking up. "Maybe read it poetry." "I tried that. It preferred pop music." "You attract very emotional technology. At least it doesn't explode when I feed it toast." She didn't laugh, but her ears twitched. They didn't talk about the scan results. Not directly. Not the fact that her body still emitted trace energy signatures the sensors couldn't identify. Not the fact that her blood ran at 37% thermal conductivity, which shouldn't have been biologically possible. Not the fact that her dreams, when she did sleep, sometimes triggered electromagnetic pulses, strong enough to knock out the kitchen appliances. Instead, they talked about Earth customs, about how humans liked round tables and square meals and triangular warning signs. She asked why chairs had 4 legs when 3 was more efficient. He asked why her people had genetically altered themselves to perceive sound in 3 dimensions. "So you can hear behind corners?" he asked. She nodded. "And through walls." "That's terrifying." "It's handy during arguments." He considered that. "And you lost a war?" "We didn't lose," she said. "We escaped." That shut him up. A week later, the signal changed. Alaris sat bolt upright in the middle of breakfast. The spoon fell from her hand into her protein slurry, which immediately hardened into something approximating concrete. Her eyes narrowed. "They're here." Jace was still half asleep. "They who?" She looked at the console. "The hunters." He got up, stumbled, stubbed his toe on the tool crate, and swore creatively. "You told me the signal was scrambled?" It was. So, they're smarter. She didn't look scared. She looked resigned, like someone who had been through this before and had learned that hope was the dangerous part. Jace grabbed his coat. How much time do we have? Maybe a day. Well, that's more than usual, he muttered. She stood slowly, her hands flexing. You should leave. Hard no. They won't care about you. I don't care about them. You don't understand. I don't have to, he said. You live here now. This is your home too. She stared at him for a long time. You're ridiculous. Yeah, but I make great soup. He didn't. His soup was terrible. But she smiled anyway. They spent the rest of the day setting up defenses, motion-triggered alarms, cloaking fields. Elleris activated something deep in the bowels of the station that made Nessa emit a long, sulky groan. You just turned on the defense grid, didn't you? Jace asked. Partially. What's the other part? I may have borrowed a satellite. He blinked. You stole a satellite? I repurposed an orphaned orbital asset. That's literally the definition of stealing. It was lonely. The satellite, which had been sitting derelict in low orbit for years, was now linked directly to their perimeter sensors. It pulsed with strange light and responded to Alaris's neural commands with eerie speed. The sun set. The snow fell. They waited. At midnight, Nessa whispered through the station. Unidentified vessel entering atmosphere. Trajectory suggests controlled descent. Elleris stood, gaze distant. Jace gripped a wrench like it was a sword. Ready? No, me neither. The silence stretched. Then Alaris said, If I don't come back, you will. You don't know that. I know you can hear through walls and melt snow with your mind. You've got this. She tilted her head. You're very bad at speeches. I'm warming up. She touched his shoulder, just once. Then she was gone into the night. Jace stood alone. The wrench shook in his hand. Outside, the stars whispered, and something answered back. The ship touched down like it was trying not to wake the neighbors. No sonic boom, no dramatic scorch marks, just a low vibration that hummed through the station's foundation and made Jace's coffee spill into his lap. He hissed and bolted upright. This is not a drill. Also, ow. Nessa chimed in, unnervingly chipper. Proximity breach detected. Unidentified craft is of Virellan make. Third iteration, stealth chassis. Shall I activate emergency protocol, Omega Fajita? That's not what that's called. It is now. Outside, the air shimmered with the arrival of the ship's cloaking field, folding away like crumpled paper. It was smaller than he expected. Sleek, black, shaped like a stingray that had been given an interstellar budget in a personal vendetta. He watched from the control room window, fingers drumming against the console. Elleris had disappeared into the tree line an hour ago, saying only, I need them to see what they've done. Jace, for his part, was reconsidering every life choice that had led him to be standing in thermal pajamas while a possibly hostile alien vessel sniffed around his front yard. The outer hatch of the ship slid open. Two figures stepped out, tall, armored, and incredibly smug-looking, even through their polarized helmets. One held a scanning rod. The other was carrying what looked suspiciously like a grenade launcher, but glowed with the unmistakable hue of something that definitely violated half the intergalactic treaties Jace had never signed. He tapped the comms. Nessa, can we, I don't know, talk to them? Interfacing now. Translating dialect. Scanning for peaceful intent. A pause. Scan inconclusive. Also, one of them has bad breath. Jace squinted. How do you... Never mind. The two Virellans moved like sharks with diplomacy badges. They didn't knock. They didn't even look around. They just walked straight toward the station, the scanner sweeping in a precise arc. Jace ducked under the window, then stood up again, realized that was pointless, and ran to activate the outer door's lockdown sequence. Alaris, he said into the comm, you seeing this? Static. Not a great time to ghost me. One of the Virellans tapped their helmet. A voice came through the external speakers, smooth and filtered, like velvet wrapped around a blade. Station occupant, you are harboring a fugitive. Release her to our custody, and no harm will come to your property. Jace stared at the mic. Then he pressed the button. Which property? Because my toaster is already a lost cause. A pause. This is not a negotiation. Then you're doing it wrong. They raised the scanner, pointed it directly at the station's entrance. The grenade launcher thing made a low hum. Last warning. Jay scratched his head. Okay, but just so I'm clear, did she break a law? Or are you guys just really bad at losing tag? The scanner crackled. Then the entire clearing lit up in a brilliant pulse of violet as the cloaked satellite Alaris had borrowed activated. The two Varellans were lifted bodily into the air, suspended in a stasis net of light. Their weapons clattered to the ground. Jace stared. Well, that worked better than my plan. From the trees, Alaris emerged. She wasn't running. She didn't look afraid. She looked furious. She stepped into the open, long ears back, eyes glowing faintly. The satellite hovered above her like a loyal hound with laser teeth. Hello, commanders, she said. One of them struggled against the stasis field. Defector 9 Theta, you are hereby... I hereby interrupt you, she said, because I am done being cataloged. Jace ran out to meet her, trying to look brave and only partially succeeding. So, was this part of the plan? Yes, she said. You couldn't have told me. No, she said. You would have gotten dramatic. Excuse me, I am always dramatic. Exactly. She stepped closer to the floating Varellans. You tracked me. You crossed boundaries. You invaded. One of them snarled. You stole information. I remembered information, she snapped. It's not my fault your amnesia protocols were as poorly designed as your moral compass. The satellite pulsed again. Jace flinched. One of the Varellans whimpered. Alaris looked up at Jace. They want me because I didn't forget what they did. What we did, I was part of it once. Not by choice. He nodded slowly. You don't have to explain. They'll send more. Then we get a bigger satellite. She blinked at him. You would fight a war for me? I'm already fighting the toaster. This is just a bigger campaign. For the first time that day, she smiled. Later, after the Virulons were dumped in a containment bubble and pinged into low orbit for pickup by neutral mediators, Nessa's idea, Jace and Alaris sat under the stars, wrapped in thermal blankets, and eating burned marshmallows from the emergency rations bin. She bit into one and made a face. This is like chewing insulation. Exactly, it's nostalgic. Your childhood was terrifying. He poked the fire. So what now? She was quiet for a moment. I don't know. I'm not hunted anymore. But I'm not Virulon either. Not really. You could be human. I can already taste disappointment and sarcasm. Am I not halfway there? Full citizenship, he said solemnly, comes with bad coffee and seasonal depression. She laughed. He looked at her. Seriously, you want to stay? She met his eyes. I said I had nowhere else to go. And I said you could have a home. She reached over and took his hand, not out of desperation, just something solid, something hers. In the sky above, the stars didn't sing, but for once they listened. Jace woke to the smell of something burning. He bolted upright, expecting a hull breach or an alien firefight, only to find Alaris sitting cross-legged on the floor, poking at the food dispenser with what looked like a titanium chopstick. I was experimenting, she said calmly as smoke curled from the vent. With what? Arson? She held up a tray of what might once have been pancakes. I call it culinary defiance. He blinked. It's hissing. That's the defiance part. He took one look at the carbonized heap and slid on his boots. Emergency breakfast it is. They sat in the observation dome, wrapped in coats, chewing something that claimed to be cereal but crunched like ceramic. Outside, the snow drifted lazily across the hills, and for once, no ships loomed on the horizon, no satellites buzzed with coded threats. You know, Jace said, mouth half full, there was a time I thought the weirdest thing that had happened up here was the shower trying to sing opera. It still does, Alaris said, but only when you're not listening. He laughed, coughed on a cereal shard, and waved her off when she moved to help. No, it's fine. If I die, bury me with the toaster. Let it finish the job. She shook her head, smiling. Her smiles were more frequent now, less guarded. The containment pod housing the captured Virulons had been retrieved by a neutral envoy 2 days ago. An odd-looking sphere piloted by a species of cloud-like entities that communicated through smell. Negotiations had gone better than expected, possibly because one of the Virulons turned out to have an olfactory allergy and surrendered just to escape the diplomatic bouquet. They hadn't heard from the Virulon hierarchy since. Not a threat, not a warning, just silence. It was either respect, fear, or the intergalactic equivalent of ghosting. "Do you think they'll come back?" Jace asked. Elleris tapped her fingers together thoughtfully. "Number? They underestimated me. They won't make that mistake twice." "Good, because I am out of satellites to borrow." "You never had any satellites." "Which is exactly why I'm out." They cleaned up breakfast. Jace chased the last piece of Defiant pancake into a vent with a broom and spent the morning recalibrating the new defense grid. It had been integrated into Nessa's systems and now featured an auto-SAS protocol that responded to unauthorized scans with passive-aggressive haikus. They'd tested it on a passing survey drone. The resulting poem insulted its mother, and it left orbit immediately. By noon, the sky had cleared. Elleris stood on the roof of the station, gazing out across the ice fields with her ears twitching at every gust of wind. Jace joined her with a hot mug of synth chai. "It's quiet. For now." He offered her the mug. She took it, her hands brushing his. "You're different," he said, "since they came." "I remember who I was," she said. "That helps." "And who was that?" "A coward, a survivor, someone who ran." He sipped from his mug. "Well, running worked. You made it here. I didn't think I deserved to. Not until you didn't give up on me. Wasn't an option. It could have been. But then who would reprogram the food dispenser to insult me in 9 languages? Only 3. The rest are just strongly worded suggestions." She tilted her head. "And you? Have you changed?" "I sleep with a phase blaster under my pillow now." She raised an eyebrow. "And I care," he added softer. "About something, about someone. First time in a long while." She didn't say anything to that, just leaned against him a little. Later that day, the generator hiccuped. A minor fluctuation, nothing critical. But it sent Jace crawling through ducts again, muttering to himself and occasionally shouting for tools that didn't exist. Elleris followed him, offering increasingly ridiculous suggestions. "Try talking to it gently." "I am not seducing the generator." "Maybe it's lonely. Maybe you're lonely." "That's why I reprogrammed the microwave to call me Captain." He popped his head out of the duct, face smudged with grease. "You what?" "Don't worry, it only salutes when it's defrosting something." They patched the generator and spent the rest of the evening testing a new terraforming module she'd scavenged from the Virulon's tech. It was small-scale but powerful, enough to coax a few green shoots from the sterile soil near the dome. Jace squinted at the tiny sprout. "Is that a plant?" "It's a suggestion of one." "Is it edible?" "Only if you're feeling extremely brave and already have medical insurance." They sat together watching the little green thing push stubbornly against the frost. Life, rewriting the odds. A metaphor if they were the kind of people who liked those, which begrudgingly they were becoming. That night she asked him if he still wanted to be alone. "No," he said. "No? Turns out I'm terrible at it." She took his hand again. Not because she was scared or broken, but because that's what people did. People with homes, with roots. Even if the soil was frozen and the roof leaked and the toaster had unresolved anger issues. The stars above remained silent, but now they were watching something worth witnessing. In the weeks that followed, more changes came. Nessa learned sarcasm. The microwave tried to declare independence and was diplomatically annexed with chocolate. Jace found a rhythm, and Elleris found a name for the sound the wind made through the satellite fins. She said it meant belonging in her native tongue. He said it sounded like indigestion. They compromised and named it Fred, and slowly in the cracks between silence and chaos, something grew. Home. It wasn't made of walls or coordinates. It was in laughter, shared jokes, burned breakfasts, and arguments about which planet had the worst weather. Spoiler, still Earth. It was in every choice to stay, to show up, to not give up on each other. Jace didn't ask what came next. Neither did she. They just opened the dome, let in the sky, and waited to see what bloomed.